The rain hammered down on the cracked asphalt as 8-year-old Marcus clutched his bundle of wilted roses, their petals bruised and dropping onto the wet pavement. His thin frame shivered beneath a jacket 3 sizes too big, hand-me-down from the shelter that had become his temporary home. Most drivers sped past without a glance, their windshield wipers working furiously against the storm. But one black sedan slowed to a stop. The window rolled down, revealing a man in an expensive suit who would ask just one question that would change everything. The man stepped out into the downpour, his polished shoes splashing in puddles as he approached the trembling boy. "I'll take them all," he said, pulling out his wallet. Then he knelt down, rain soaking through his tailored clothing, and asked the question that would reveal the true reason behind Marcus's desperate night in the storm. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button for more real, emotional, life-changing stories like this. And let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The storm had been raging for 3 days straight, turning the streets of downtown into rivers of murky water that reflected the neon lights of late-night establishments and the occasional street lamp. Marcus pressed himself against the cold brick wall of a closed restaurant, trying to find some shelter from the relentless downpour. His small hands, red and raw from the cold, held tight to the bundle of roses he had managed to salvage from the dumpster behind Rosario's flower shop earlier that morning. The flowers weren't perfect, far from it. Some had brown edges on their petals, others were missing stems, and a few had already begun to wilt from the day's heat before the storm arrived. But they were all he had, and they represented hope in a world that had shown him precious little of it. The owner of the flower shop, Mrs. Rosario, had taken pity on him when she found him rummaging through her discarded blooms. Instead of calling the police or shooing him away, she had wrapped the salvageable flowers in yesterday's newspaper and told him he could try to sell them, but only if he promised to stay safe. Marcus had made that promise, though safety seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. At 8 years old, he had already learned that the world was a harsh place for children without parents, without homes, without anyone to care whether they came back at night. The Riverside Children's Shelter where he stayed was overcrowded and underfunded, with barely enough food to go around and certainly not enough to take care of his 4-year-old sister, Lily, who had been sick for weeks with a persistent cough that kept her awake at night. The shelter's nurse had told him that Lily needed better nutrition, warm milk, and medicine that cost more than the $20 a month the state provided for each child's care. Marcus had listened to her labored breathing every night, watched her small chest rise and fall with difficulty, and made a decision that brought him to this street corner in the middle of a thunderstorm. He had been standing there for 4 hours, watching cars rush past in streams of yellow and red light. Occasionally, a driver would slow down, roll down their window just enough to see what he was selling, then speed away without a word. A few had called out cruel comments about a kid being out so late, but none had stopped to buy even a single flower. His clothes were soaked through, his hair plastered to his skull, and his sneakers squelched with every step, but he couldn't give up. Not when Lily was back at the shelter, probably awake right now, coughing into her thin pillow. The rain seemed to intensify as the evening wore on, turning from a steady downpour into a proper storm, complete with thunder that shook the windows of nearby buildings and lightning that illuminated the street in stark white. Flashes. Marcus had seen several people duck into doorways and under awnings, but he remained at his post, holding his flowers high enough that passing drivers could see them through their rain-streaked windshields. It was nearly 11 o'clock when the black sedan appeared through the curtain of rain. Unlike the other cars that had passed, this one moved slowly, deliberately, as if the driver were looking for something specific. The vehicle was sleek and expensive, the kind Marcus had only seen in movies or parked outside the fancy hotels downtown. As it approached his corner, the car slowed even more, and Marcus felt a flutter of hope in his chest. The sedan came to a complete stop directly in front of him, its hazard lights blinking in the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Marcus could see the silhouette of a man behind the wheel, but the tinted windows and rain made it impossible to make out any details. Then, slowly, the driver's side window began to roll down. The man inside was middle-aged, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a dark suit that looked like it cost more than most people made in a month, and a watch that caught the light from the street lamp above. But what struck Marcus most was the expression on the man's face. Not pity or annoyance, but something that looked almost like recognition. "Those are beautiful flowers," the man said, his voice carrying easily over the sound of the rain. "How much for the whole bundle?" Marcus blinked, certain he had misheard. "The whole bundle, sir? Every single flower you have there. Name your price." Marcus's mind raced. He had been hoping to sell the flowers individually for $1 each. Maybe $2 if he was lucky. There were 15 roses in his bundle, some in better condition than others. I was thinking maybe $15 for all of them." The man smiled, and something about that smile made Marcus feel warm for the first time all day. That seems far too little for such beautiful flowers on such a terrible night. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a wallet, thick with bills. "How about $50? Marcus's eyes widened. $50 would buy milk for Lily, maybe even some of the medicine the nurse had mentioned. It would buy food that wasn't just the watery soup and stale bread they served at the shelter. It would buy hope. "Yes, sir," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, sir." But instead of just taking the money and driving away, the man did something unexpected. He turned off his car's engine, pulled the umbrella from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the storm. The umbrella was large and black, the expensive kind that didn't turn inside out in strong wind, and he held it over both of them as he approached Marcus. "You shouldn't be out here alone in weather like this," the man said, his tone gentle but concerned. "It's dangerous." "I know, sir," Marcus replied, holding out the bundle of roses with both hands. "But I needed to sell them." The man took the flowers carefully, as if they were made of precious crystal rather than damaged petals and broken stems. He examined them with the same attention he might give to a rare work of art, turning them over in his hands and actually smelling their faint fragrance. "These are lovely," he said. "Someone taught you how to care for flowers." "Mrs. Rosario showed me how to keep them fresh," Marcus said. "She said even broken flowers can be beautiful if you treat them right." The man's expression softened even further. "Mrs. Rosario? Sounds like a wise woman." He reached into his wallet again and pulled out the promised $50, but he didn't hand it over immediately. Instead, he knelt down in the rain, bringing himself to Marcus's eye level, seemingly unconcerned about the water soaking through his expensive suit. "Can I ask you something?" the man said. Marcus nodded, clutching the money but not yet believing it was real. "Who are you trying to help?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He had expected to be asked why he was out so late, or where his parents were, or why he wasn't in school. He had prepared answers for all of those questions, responses that would satisfy adult curiosity without revealing too much about his situation. But this question, simple as it was, seemed to see right through all of his carefully constructed defenses. "My sister," Marcus said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "My sister needs milk." The man's eyes never left Marcus's face. "Tell me about your sister." And something about the way he asked, the genuine interest in his voice, and the patience in his posture, made Marcus want to tell the truth. The whole truth, not just the sanitized version he usually gave to social workers and shelter staff. "Her name is Lily," Marcus began, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. "She's 4 years old, and she's been sick for a long time. She coughs at night. And sometimes she can't breathe right. The nurse at the shelter says she needs better food and medicine, but there's not enough money for that. The shelter tries, but there are so many kids, and they can't help everyone." The man listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each word. "I thought if I could sell some flowers, I could buy her some milk," Marcus continued. "Real milk, not the powdered stuff they give us at the shelter. And maybe some of that medicine that helps with coughing. I know it's expensive, but I thought maybe if I worked hard enough." He trailed off, suddenly aware of how impossible his plan sounded when spoken aloud. $50 was more money than he had ever held in his hands, but he knew it wouldn't be enough for everything Lily needed. It wouldn't be enough to fix the bigger problems that had brought them to the shelter in the first place. The man was quiet for a long moment, rain pattering against his umbrella and running in rivulets down the sides. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but firm. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus, sir." "Marcus Johnson." "Marcus Johnson," the man repeated, as if committing it to memory. "My name is Alexander Chen. I'd like to meet your sister, if that would be all right with you." Marcus blinked in surprise. "You want to meet Lily?" "I do," Alexander said. "But first, let's get you out of this rain. My car is warm, and I think we should have a proper conversation about how to help your sister." Marcus hesitated. He had been taught, like all children, not to get into cars with strangers. But there was something about Alexander Chen that felt different from the other adults Marcus had encountered. Maybe it was the way he had knelt in the rain to talk to him, or the way he had examined the damaged flowers as if they were precious, or the way he had asked about Lily with genuine concern rather than the distant professionalism of social workers. "Is it okay?" Marcus asked. "I mean, are you sure?" Alexander smiled again, that same warm expression that had made Marcus feel safe from the moment he first saw it. "It's more than okay, Marcus. It's exactly what we should do." He stood up, still holding the umbrella over both of them, and gestured toward the sedan. "Come on. Let's get you warmed up, and then we'll figure out how to help Lily." As they walked toward the car, Marcus couldn't help but notice how different Alexander seemed from the other wealthy people he had occasionally seen around the city. Those people walked quickly, talking on phones or looking at their watches, always in a hurry to get somewhere more important. Alexander moved with purpose, but without urgency, as if he had all the time in the world to spend on a conversation with a cold bass. Wet child sowing flowers in the rain. The interior of the sedan was everything Marcus had imagined it would be. The seats were leather, soft and warm, and there was a subtle scent of expensive cologne mixed with something that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen before she died. Alexander helped him into the passenger seat and turned up the heat, then handed him a small towel from the glove compartment. "For your hair," Alexander said. "You're soaked through." Marcus accepted the towel gratefully and began to dry off as much as he could. The warmth of the car was almost overwhelming after hours in the cold rain, and he found himself shivering as his body began to thaw. "Tell me more about the shelter," Alexander said, as he settled into the driver's seat. "How long have you and Lily been there?" "About 6 months, Marcus replied, "since our foster parents said they couldn't take care of us anymore." "And before that?" Marcus's hands stilled on the towel. This was the part of the story he usually avoided, the part that made social workers get that particular look in their eyes, the look that said they were already calculating how much paperwork his case would require. "Our mom died when Lily was 2, he said quietly. "Car accident. We lived with our grandma after that, but she got sick too. Cancer. She died last year." Alexander's expression didn't change, but Marcus could see something shift in his eyes, a deepening of the concern that had been there from the beginning. "I'm sorry," Alexander said simply. "That's a lot of loss for someone so young." "The foster family was nice at first," Marcus continued, surprising himself with his willingness to share. "But they had their own kids, and when Lily got sick, they said they couldn't handle it. They said she needed more help than they could give." "So you ended up at the shelter?" "Yeah. It's not a bad place," Marcus added quickly, as if defending the shelter might somehow make their situation better. "The people who work there are nice, and they try to help. But there are so many kids, and not enough money for everything. Lily's medicine is expensive, and the good food costs more than they can afford." Alexander nodded slowly. "And that's why you're out here tonight, selling flowers in the rain." "I know it's not much," Marcus said, clutching the $50 in his pocket. "But I thought maybe if I could earn a little money, I could buy her some milk and maybe some of that cough medicine. She's been coughing so much lately, and sometimes she can't sleep." "Marcus," Alexander said, his voice serious, "what you're doing for your sister is remarkable, but you shouldn't have to do it alone." Before Marcus could respond, Alexander's phone buzzed. He glanced at it briefly, then looked back at Marcus with an expression that seemed to have reached some kind of decision. "I need to make a call," Alexander said. "But first, I want you to know that you're safe here and that we're going to figure out how to help Lily. Okay?" End quote. Marcus nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what Alexander meant. Adults had made promises before. Promises that usually ended with him and Lily being moved to a different foster home or a different room in the shelter. But something about Alexander's crass tone made him want to believe that this time might be different. Alexander dialed a number on his phone and waited for someone to answer. When they did, he spoke in a voice that was both warm and authoritative. The voice of someone who was used to making things happen. "Patricia, it's Alexander. I need you to arrange a meeting with the Riverside Children's Shelter, first thing tomorrow morning." "Yes, I know it's Saturday. This is important." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "I'll explain everything in the morning, but for now, I need you to contact Dr. Williams and have him meet us at the shelter. We may have a child who needs immediate medical attention." Marcus's eyes widened. "You know a doctor?" Alexander smiled. "I know several doctors. Dr. Williams is a pediatrician, one of the best in the city. If Lily needs medical care, he'll make sure she gets it." "But I can't pay for a doctor," Marcus said, panic creeping into his voice. "The money from the flowers isn't enough for that." "Marcus," Alexander said gently, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. You don't need to worry about paying for anything. Not for the doctor, not for medicine, not for milk or food, or anything else Lily needs. Do you understand?" Marcus stared at him, trying to process what he was hearing. "I don't understand. Why would you help us? You don't even know us." Alexander was quiet for a moment, looking out at the rain-soaked street. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more personal than it had been before. "When I was about your age, my family came to this country with nothing," he said. "We didn't speak the language, we didn't have money, and we didn't know anyone who could help us. My parents worked 3 jobs each, but it still wasn't enough. I remember being hungry, really hungry, and watching my little brother get sick because we couldn't afford to take him to the doctor." He turned back to Marcus, and there was something in his eyes that looked like memory and pain and determination all mixed together. "One day, when things were at their worst, a stranger helped us. A woman who owned a small restaurant gave my parents jobs, helped us find a place to live, and made sure my brother got the medical care he needed. She didn't have to do any of that. She just saw a family that needed help, and she helped." Marcus listened, transfixed by the story. "That woman changed our lives," Alexander continued. "She gave us a chance when no one else would. And eventually, my parents were able to build a successful business. They always said they owed everything to her kindness." "What happened to her?" Marcus asked. "She became like a grandmother to us," Alexander said with a smile. "She was at my wedding, and she held my children when they were born. She taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is help someone when they need it most." "Is that why you stopped tonight?" "I stopped tonight because I saw a boy who was willing to stand in the rain for hours to help his sister," Alexander said. "That kind of love, that kind of dedication, that's something special. It's something worth protecting." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes, though he couldn't tell if they were from relief or gratitude, or just the overwhelming realization that someone, finally, was taking him seriously. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Alexander said, starting the car's engine, "we go to the shelter so I can meet Lily. Then, tomorrow, we start making some changes." The drive to the Riverside Children's Shelter took 20 minutes through the rain-slicked streets. Marcus had made this journey many times before, usually in the back of a social worker's car or a city bus, but never in a vehicle this comfortable or with someone who seemed genuinely interested in his answers to questions about his life. Alexander asked about school, and Marcus explained that he attended classes at the community center near the shelter when he could, but that he sometimes had to miss days when Lily was feeling particularly sick. He asked about Marcus's interests, and Marcus shyly admitted that he liked to read and that he was good at math, though he didn't get much chance to practice either skill. He asked about Lily's personality, and Marcus's whole face lit up as he described his sister's laugh and the way she could make friends with anyone, even when she was feeling unwell. "She's really smart," Marcus said as they pulled into the shelter's parking lot. "She can already read some words, and she knows all her numbers up to 20. She's going to be really good at school when she's old enough to go. She sounds wonderful, Alexander said. "I'm looking forward to meeting her." The Riverside Children's Shelter was a converted warehouse that had been turned into a residential facility for children who had nowhere else to go. It wasn't pretty, with its concrete walls and industrial windows, but it was clean and safe, and the staff did their best to make it feel like home. Marcus had lived in worse places. The night supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, was surprised to see Marcus returning with a stranger, especially one dressed in an expensive suit. She met them at the door with a concerned expression and a list of questions about where Marcus had been and who Alexander was. "I'm sorry," she said to Alexander after Marcus had explained about selling the flowers. "I appreciate your kindness, but we have policies about visitors, especially at this time of night." Alexander handed her a business card. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Patterson. I'm Alexander Chen, and I'd like to discuss some options for helping Marcus and his sister. I'll be here first thing tomorrow morning with my attorney and some medical professionals, but tonight I just wanted to meet Lily and make sure she's all right." Mrs. Patterson looked at the business card, and her eyes widened slightly. "You're the Alexander Chen, the one who owns Chen Industries?" "I am," Alexander said simply. "And I'd like to help these children, if you'll allow me to." Mrs. Patterson's demeanor changed immediately. She had been polite but cautious before. Now she was almost deferential. "Of course, Mr. Chen. Of course. Let me take you to see Lily right away." The shelter's sleeping quarters were on the second floor, divided into small rooms that housed 4 children each. Lily was in the room Marcus shared with 3 other boys, all of whom were currently asleep. She was awake, however, sitting up in her narrow bed and coughing into a thin blanket. The moment Marcus entered the room, her face transformed. Despite her obvious illness, she smiled broadly and reached out her small arms for a hug. "Marcus," she whispered, mindful of the other sleeping children. "You're back. Did you sell the flowers?" "I did," Marcus said, gathering her into his arms. "I sold all of them." "That's wonderful," Lily said, then dissolved into another coughing fit. Alexander watched this reunion with an expression that was difficult to read. When Lily's coughing subsided, Marcus gently introduced them. "Lily, this is Mr. Chen. He's the one who bought all the flowers." Lily looked at Alexander with curious eyes. She was small for her age, with the same dark hair as Marcus, but paler skin that suggested she hadn't been getting enough sun or proper nutrition. Despite her illness, there was something bright and intelligent about her that shone through. "Thank you for buying Marcus's flowers," she said politely. "They were very pretty. They were beautiful," Alexander agreed, kneeling down beside her bed. "But I think I got the better end of that deal." Lily giggled, a sound that was interrupted by more coughing. Alexander's expression grew concerned as he watched her struggle to catch her breath. "Lily," he said gently, "how long have you been coughing like this?" "A long time," she said when she could speak again. "The nurse gave me some medicine, but it didn't help very much." Alexander looked at Mrs. Patterson, who had been standing quietly in the doorway. "Has she seen a doctor?" "We took her to the clinic last month," Mrs. Patterson said. "They said it was probably just a cold that was taking a long time to clear up. They gave her some over-the-counter cough medicine, but as you can see, it hasn't been very effective. I'd like to have my physician take a look at her," Alexander said. "With your permission, of course." Mrs. Patterson nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Chen. Whatever you think is best." Alexander spent the next hour sitting with Marcus and Lily, listening to their stories and watching them interact. It was clear that Marcus had been taking care of his sister in ways that went far beyond what should be expected of an 8-year-old. He anticipated her needs, helped her when her coughing got bad, and told her stories to distract her from feeling unwell. Lily, in turn, looked at her brother with complete trust and adoration. "Marcus takes really good care of me," she told Alexander at one point. "He makes sure I eat all my food, and he reads to me when I can't sleep, and he gives me his blanket when I'm cold." "He sounds like a very good brother," Alexander said. "He's the best brother in the whole world," Lily declared, with the absolute certainty that only young children possess. When it was time to leave, Alexander made promises to both children that he would return the next day with a doctor and some people who could help them. He gave Marcus his phone number and told him to call if Lily got worse during the night. "I don't understand," Marcus said as Alexander prepared to leave. "Why are you doing all this? We're nobody special." Alexander knelt down one more time, looking directly into Marcus's eyes. "Marcus, you are absolutely wrong about that. What you did tonight, standing in the rain to help your sister, that makes you very special indeed. And Lily, with her sweet nature and her bright smile, even when she's not feeling well, she's special too." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I told you about the woman who helped my family when I was young. She saw something in us that we couldn't see in ourselves. She saw potential. And love. And the kind of strength that comes from caring about each other. That's what I see when I look at you and Lily." "But we don't have anything to give back," Marcus said. "We can't pay you, and we can't help you with anything." "Marcus," Alexander said with a smile, "you've already given me more than you know. You've reminded me of what's really important in life. You've shown me the kind of love and sacrifice that makes the world a better place. That's worth more than any amount of money." As Alexander drove home through the now lightning rain, he couldn't stop thinking about the 2 children he had left at the shelter. He had been successful in business for over 20 years, had built a company that employed thousands of people and generated millions in revenue. He had a beautiful home, expensive cars, and access to anything money could buy. But he hadn't felt this sense of purpose, this clarity about what needed to be done, in a very long time. He called his attorney, Patricia Williams, despite the late hour, and began making arrangements that would change not only his life, but the lives of Marcus and Lily as well. The next morning came gray and overcast, but the storm had passed, leaving the air clean and fresh. Alexander arrived at the Riverside Children's Shelter at 8 o'clock sharp, accompanied by Dr. Williams, Patricia Williams, and 2 other members of his legal team. Dr. Williams was a kind man in his 60s who had been treating children for over 30 years. He examined Lily thoroughly, listening to her chest, checking her throat, and asking detailed questions about her symptoms. After an hour of tests, he emerged from the examination room with a serious expression. "She has pneumonia," he told Alexander and the shelter staff. "It's not severe yet, but it will be if left untreated. She needs antibiotics immediately, and she needs better nutrition and living conditions to recover properly." "What does that mean for her treatment?" Alexander asked. "She needs to be somewhere where she can rest, eat well, and get proper medical care," Dr. Williams said. "The shelter is doing the best they can, but it's not equipped to handle a child with ongoing medical needs." Alexander nodded. "I understand. What would you recommend?" "Ideally, she would be in a home environment with people who can care for her properly," Dr. Williams said. "Somewhere quiet and clean, with good food and consistent medical supervision." Alexander looked at Patricia, who had been taking notes throughout the conversation. "Do we make that happen?" "I've been researching the legal options," Patricia said. "Given the circumstances, and the fact that both children are currently wards of the state, it's possible to file for emergency guardianship. If you're serious about this, Alexander, we can start the process immediately." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," Alexander said. The next few hours were a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings with social workers. Alexander's team worked with the efficiency that had made Chen Industries successful, but they also worked with the compassion that the situation demanded. By noon, they had secured temporary guardianship of both Marcus and Lily, pending a more thorough review process that would take several weeks. When Alexander broke the news to the children, their reactions were everything he had hoped for, and more. "You mean we get to live with you?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "If that's what you want," Alexander said. "I have a big house with plenty of room, and I think you'd like it there." "But we don't know how to live in a big house," Marcus said, his practical nature asserting itself even in the face of this incredible opportunity. "That's okay," Alexander said with a laugh. "I'll teach you. And you can teach me some things too." "Like what?" Marcus asked. "Like how to take care of flowers," Alexander said. "I think I'd like to learn more about that." The transition to Alexander's home was smoother than anyone had expected. His house was indeed large, a sprawling suburban mansion with manicured gardens and a swimming pool. but it was also warm and welcoming. Alexander had hired a housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had raised 5 children of her own and who immediately took Marcus and Lily under her wing. Lily's health began to improve almost immediately. The antibiotics prescribed by Dr. Williams worked quickly, and within a week, her cough had significantly diminished. The nutritious meals prepared by Mrs. Rodriguez and the clean, comfortable environment of Alexander's home worked wonders for her recovery. Marcus struggled more with the adjustment. He had been taking care of Lily for so long that he didn't know how to let other people help. He woke up several times each night to check on his sister, only to find her sleeping peacefully in her new bedroom. He hovered during meals, making sure she ate everything on her plate, until Mrs. Rodriguez gently convinced him that it was okay to let her handle some of the caregiving. "You're still her big brother," she told him one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen, preparing snacks for Lily. "That will never change. But now you get to be her big brother without having to be her parent too. There's a difference." "What if I don't know how to just be her brother?" Marcus asked. "Then you'll learn," Mrs. Rodriguez said with a smile. "Just like you learned how to take care of her. Children are very good at learning new things." Alexander proved to be a patient and understanding guardian. He hired tutors to help both children catch up on their education, but he also made sure they had time to simply be children. He taught Marcus to play chess and discovered that the boy had a natural talent for strategy. He read bedtime stories to Lily and found that she had an incredible imagination and a love for adventure tales. But the most significant change came when Alexander made good on his promise to learn about flowers. He arranged for the children to visit Mrs. Rosario's flower shop, and when she learned about their new circumstances, she offered to teach them both about the flower business. "You know," she said to Alexander, after watching Marcus and Lily work with natural skill among the blooms, "I've been thinking about retiring. My children live in other cities, and I don't have anyone to leave the shop to. These children have a gift for this work. What are you suggesting?" Alexander asked. "I'm suggesting that maybe it's time for the next generation to take over," Mrs. Rosario said with a smile. "Of course, they'll need a business partner, someone with experience in running a company." Alexander looked at Marcus and Lily, who were carefully arranging a bouquet of roses, the same kind of roses that had brought them all together on that rainy night. "Are you proposing a partnership?" "I'm proposing an opportunity," Mrs. Rosario said. "For all of us." 6 months later, the adoption was finalized. Marcus and Lily Johnson became Marcus and Lily Chen, officially and permanently part of Alexander's family. The flower shop, now called Lily's Garden, in honor of its youngest partner, had become a thriving business under the combined guidance of Alexander's business acumen and Mrs. Rosario's horticultural skills. Expertise. Marcus had proven to be a natural entrepreneur, coming up with ideas for new arrangements and finding ways to make their services more appealing to customers. Lily, now fully recovered from her illness, had become the shop's unofficial greeter, charming customers with her bright smile and extensive knowledge of flower meanings. The shop had also become something of a community gathering place, known for its policy of never turning away a child in need. Alexander had established a fund that provided flowers for school events, hospital visits, and other occasions where beauty and hope were needed, but money was scarce. On the first anniversary of that rainy night, when they had all met, Alexander took Marcus and Lily back to the street corner where he had first encountered the boy selling flowers. The corner looked different now, cleaned up as part of a community development project that Alexander had quietly funded, but the memory of that night remained vivid for all of them. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" Marcus asked, as they stood together under the street lamp. "Every day," Alexander said. "But not because I regret it. I think about it because it reminds me of how much life can change in a single moment when people choose to care about each other." "I'm glad you stopped," Lily said, slipping her small hand into Alexander's larger one. "I'm glad you asked Marcus who he was trying to help." "I'm glad too," Alexander said. That question changed all of our lives. As they walked back to the car, Marcus carrying a fresh bouquet of roses that they would place on their grandmother's grave, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. He had started that evening as a successful businessman driving home from a late meeting. He had ended it as a father to two remarkable children who had taught him more about love, sacrifice, and the true meaning of family than he had ever thought possible. The flowers they carried were perfect, unmarked by rain or rough handling, arranged with the skill that came from months of practice and the love that came from years of caring for each other. But Alexander would always remember the wilted roses that Marcus had clutched in his small hands on that stormy night, and how sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. The question he had asked that night, "Who are you trying to help?" had been answered in ways he never could have imagined. Marcus had been trying to help his sister, but in doing so, he had also helped Alexander remember what was truly important in life. And Alexander, in trying to help both children, had discovered that the greatest joy came not from accumulating wealth or building businesses, but from building a family based on love, trust, and mutual care. As they drove through the city toward home, past the bright lights of shops and restaurants, past the shelter where they had first met, past the flower shop that had become their shared passion and livelihood, Alexander thought about the woman who had helped his family all those years ago. She had seen potential in a struggling immigrant family and had given them a chance to build a better life. Now, he had been able to do the same for Marcus and Lily, continuing a cycle of kindness that would undoubtedly extend far beyond their own lives. The local news had picked up their story months earlier, running a feature about the billionaire who had adopted two orphan children and started a flower business with them. The reporter had focused on the heartwarming aspects of the tale, the rags-to-riches transformation, and the power of compassion, but she had missed the deeper truth that Alexander had come to understand. This wasn't really a story about a wealthy man rescuing poor children. It was a story about how love could appear in the most unexpected places, how a single act of genuine caring could ripple outward to touch countless lives. The children Alexander had taken in had given him far more than he had given them. They had restored his faith in the fundamental goodness of people, reminded him of the joy that came from simple pleasures, and shown him that true wealth was measured not in dollars, but in the depth of human connections. Marcus had grown taller in the past year, his face losing some of its premature seriousness, as he learned to trust that he didn't have to carry the weight of the world on his small shoulders. He still looked out for Lily with the protective instincts of an older brother, but now he also had time to pursue his own interests. He had joined the chess club at his new school and had already won several tournaments. His math skills, honed by years of calculating how to stretch meager resources, had made him a standout student. More importantly, he had begun to dream about his future in ways that went beyond mere survival. He talked about going to college, maybe studying business like Alexander, and eventually expanding their flower shop into a chain of stores that could help other children in need. His dreams were big now, as big as the love and security that surrounded him. Lily had blossomed in ways that went beyond her physical recovery from illness. The shy, sickly child who had rarely left the shelter was now a confident, curious girl who made friends easily and approached each day with infectious enthusiasm. She had started dance classes and had discovered a natural grace and rhythm that delighted her teachers. But more than any specific talent, she had developed an ability to find joy in small moments that reminded everyone around her of what was truly precious in life. The flower shop had become more than just a business, it had become a symbol of hope for the entire community. Alexander had established a program that provided part-time jobs for teenagers aging out of the foster care system, giving them work experience and mentorship as they transitioned to independent living. Mrs. Rosario had become like a grandmother to Marcus and Lily, teaching them not just about flowers, but about the importance of treating every customer with dignity and respect. The shop regularly donated arrangements to nursing homes, hospitals, and community events, spreading beauty and cheer throughout the city. They had also started a scholarship fund that helped former foster children pursue education in horticulture and business, creating pathways for others to build stable, fulfilling careers. But perhaps the most meaningful development had been the informal network of support that had grown around their story. Other successful business owners had reached out to Alexander, inspired by his example to look for ways they could make a difference in their own communities. Foster families had come forward, motivated by seeing how well Marcus and Lily had thrived with proper support and resources. The Riverside Children's Shelter had received significant donations and volunteer support, allowing them to improve conditions for all the children in their care. Dr. Williams had established a clinic specifically for children in the foster care system, ensuring that medical needs wouldn't go unaddressed due to lack of resources. Alexander often marveled at how one decision, made on a rainy night when he could have simply driven past a child in need, had created such far-reaching positive changes. It reinforced his belief that every person had the power to change the world, one act of kindness at a time. The legal adoption process had been complex, involving extensive background checks, home studies, and psychological evaluations, but Alexander had approached it with the same determination that had made him successful in business. He had assembled the best legal team money could buy, not to circumvent the system, but to ensure that every requirement was met thoroughly and properly. The social workers assigned to the case had been initially skeptical. They had seen wealthy individuals attempt to adopt children before, often with good intentions, but unrealistic expectations about the challenges involved. Children who had experienced trauma and instability required patience, understanding, and specialized care that not everyone was prepared to provide. But as the months passed, it became clear that Alexander's commitment was genuine, and his approach was thoughtful. He had enrolled in parenting classes specifically designed for adoptive families, had consulted with child psychologists about how to help Marcus and Lily process their experiences, and had worked closely with the children's therapists to ensure their emotional needs were being met. The moment when the adoption was finalized had been both joyous and solemn. Standing in the courthouse, surrounded by lawyers and social workers and court officials, Alexander had felt the full weight of the responsibility he was accepting. These children would be his to protect, to guide, to love unconditionally for the rest of their lives. Marcus and Lily had worn their best clothes for the occasion, outfits that Alexander had let them choose themselves from the expensive children's boutique where they had never imagined they could afford to shop. But more than their fine clothes, what had struck everyone in the courtroom was the obvious bond between the three of them, the easy affection and mutual respect that had developed over months of living together as a family. The judge, an older woman who had presided over hundreds of adoption cases, had commented afterward that she had rarely seen such a natural fit between an adoptive parent and children. The love between them was evident in small gestures, the way Alexander automatically reached for Lily's hand when she seemed nervous, the way Marcus stood protectively close to his new father during the formal proceedings, the way all three of them smiled with genuine happiness when the adoption was declared final. That night, they had celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, just the three of them and Mrs. Rodriguez, who had become like extended family. Alexander had given each child a special gift to commemorate the day, a locket for Lily containing pictures of all the people who loved her, and a watch for Marcus engraved with the date of their adoption and the words, "Time for new beginnings." But the gifts that meant the most were the ones that couldn't be wrapped or bought. Marcus and Lily now had the security of knowing they would never be separated, never have to worry about where they would sleep or whether there would be enough food. They had the luxury of being children, of making mistakes and learning from them, without the fear that a single misstep might result in being sent away. Alexander, in turn, had gained something he hadn't even realized he was missing. His life had been successful but solitary, filled with business achievements but lacking the deep personal connections that gave meaning to success. Now his days were filled with school events and bedtime stories, with homework help and family dinners, with all the beautiful chaos that came with being a parent. The flower shop continued to thrive, becoming a beloved fixture in the community. Customers came not just for the beautiful arrangements, but for the warm atmosphere and the inspiring story behind the business. Marcus had become skilled at creating custom designs, working with customers to find exactly the right flowers to express their feelings. Lily had developed an encyclopedic knowledge of flower meanings and could help anyone find the perfect bloom to convey their message. They had expanded their services to include gardening consultations and landscaping design, with Marcus showing a particular talent for creating outdoor spaces that were both beautiful and environmentally sustainable. Alexander had been amazed by the boys' intuitive understanding of how plants grew and what they needed to flourish. The success of the business had attracted attention from industry publications and business schools, who wanted to study their model of combining profit with social purpose. Alexander had been invited to speak at conferences about corporate social responsibility and the importance of giving back to communities. But he always made sure that Marcus and Lily were part of these presentations when appropriate, because their perspective, as the beneficiaries of kindness, was just as important as his perspective as the giver. They spoke eloquently about what it meant to be given a second chance, about how security and love had allowed them to discover talents and dreams they never knew they possessed. One particularly meaningful speaking engagement had been at a conference for foster care organizations. Marcus, now 10 years old and poised beyond his years, had addressed an audience of social workers, foster parents, and child advocates with a maturity that belied his age. "I want people to know that kids in foster care aren't broken," he had said, his voice clear and confident. "We've been through hard things, but that doesn't mean we can't do amazing things if someone believes in us and gives us a chance." The standing ovation that followed had lasted several minutes, and there hadn't been a dry eye in the auditorium. Afterward, dozens of people had approached Alexander to ask how they could get involved in helping children in similar situations. These speaking engagements had led to the establishment of the Chen Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting children in the foster care system. The foundation provided grants for educational opportunities, funded medical care for children with special needs, and supported innovative programs that helped foster children transition to independent parenting. Living. Alexander had initially resisted the idea of starting a foundation, feeling that it seemed too self-aggrandizing. But Marcus and Lily had convinced him that it was the right thing to do, pointing out that their own experience showed how much difference the right support could make in a child's life. "If we can help other kids the way you helped us," Lily had said with the straightforward logic of a 6-year-old, "then we should do it." The foundation had quickly grown, attracting support from other business leaders, celebrities, and ordinary citizens who were moved by the mission and the story behind it. Within 2 years, it was funding programs in dozens of cities, touching the lives of thousands of children who might otherwise have been overlooked by society. One of the foundation's most successful initiatives had been a mentorship program that paired successful adults with teenagers in foster care. The program didn't focus on adoption, recognizing that older children often needed different kinds of support, but rather on providing guidance, encouragement, and practical help as young people prepared for paired adulthood. Alexander had been personally involved in matching mentors with children, using his business networks to find volunteers who could offer not just emotional support, but also career guidance and professional staff connections. Many of the young people in the program had gone on to college or trade schools, armed with both the financial support and the personal encouragement they needed to succeed. The flower shop had become the unofficial headquarters for many of these activities, its warm atmosphere making it a natural gathering place for foundation events and volunteer meetings. Marcus and Lily often helped with these events, their natural charm and obvious happiness serving as powerful testimonials to the difference that caring adults could make in a child's life. As the second anniversary of their meeting approached, Alexander found himself reflecting on how completely his life had changed. The driven businessman who had once measured success solely in financial terms now found his greatest satisfaction in the small moments of family life. The bedtime conversations with Lily about her dreams of becoming a dancer, the chess matches with Marcus that had become increasingly competitive as the boy's skills improved. He had learned to see the world through their eyes, to appreciate the simple pleasure of a well-tended garden, or the satisfaction that came from creating something beautiful with his hands. The flower shop had taught him patience and attention to detail in ways that his corporate boardroom never had. But perhaps most importantly, Marcus and Lily had taught him about resilience and hope. Despite everything they had endured, they approached each day with optimism and curiosity. They had shown him that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, and that love could indeed conquer the deepest wounds. The night before the anniversary, as they sat together in the living room of the home that had become truly theirs, Alexander watched Marcus help Lily with a school project about family trees. The assignment had initially caused some anxiety, as family trees were complicated concepts for adopted children. But their teacher had been understanding and had allowed them to create a tree that showed their chosen family alongside their biological roots. "We can put Grandma here," Marcus was saying, pointing to a branch on their drawing. And Mom here, because even though they're not with us anymore, they're still part of our family. And we can put Alexander here, Lily added, carefully writing his name in her still-developing handwriting, because he chose us, and we chose him. What about Mrs. Rodriguez? Marcus asked. And Mrs. Rosario? They're like family too. We'll need a bigger tree, Lily said with a giggle. Alexander watched them work, marveling at their ability to create meaning and connection from experiences that might have left other children bitter or closed off. They'd taken the concept of family and expanded it to include everyone who had shown them love and support, creating a network of relationships that was both chosen and cherished. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed, Alexander walked through his house, looking at the evidence of how completely his life had been transformed. The formal living room that had once been used only for business entertaining now contained a comfortable reading corner where they gathered for story time. The dining room that had hosted power lunches now rang with the laughter of family dinners. The home office, where he had once worked late into the night, was now shared space, with a desk for Marcus to do homework and an art station where Lily created her elaborate drawings. Every room bore the traces of children's lives, from the carefully displayed artwork on the refrigerator to the chess set permanently stationed in the den. The house that had once been a showcase of his financial success had become a real home, filled with the warmth and chaos and love that made all the material possessions meaningful. On the morning of the anniversary, they returned once again to the street corner where their lives had intersected on that rainy night 2 years before. The corner looked entirely different now, part of a revitalized neighborhood that had seen significant investment and improvement. The flower shop they had opened was just a few blocks away, its colorful storefront a bright spot in a community that was experiencing renewal. They carried with them a bouquet of the most beautiful roses they had ever created, perfect blooms in shades of red and pink and white, arranged with all the skill they had developed over months of practice and learning. But as they stood together on that corner, Alexander remembered the wilted, damaged flowers that Marcus had clutched so desperately that night. And he understood that those imperfect blooms had been the most beautiful of all, because they had been offered with such pure love and hope. I think about that night a lot, Marcus said, as they prepared to leave. I think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped. But you did stop, Lily added, looking up at Alexander with the absolute trust and affection that still moved him to tears. You asked the right question, and you listened to the answer. And now we're a family, Marcus concluded with the simple finality that children brought to complex emotional truths. As they walked back to their car, past the thriving businesses and well-maintained buildings that had replaced the empty lots and abandoned structures of 2 years ago, Alexander thought about the ripple effects of that single moment of connection. Their story had inspired others to act, had created jobs and opportunities, and hope in ways that extended far beyond their own personal happiness. The question he had asked that night, "Who are you trying to help?" had become something of a motto for the foundation and for their approach to business and life. It was a question that assumed the best of people, that recognized that even those who seemed to have nothing often had someone they cared about more than themselves. It was a question that had led to countless other acts of kindness and connection, as people inspired by their story had looked for their own opportunities to make a difference. Foster families had come forward, volunteers had signed up to help, donations had poured in to support programs for children in need. But more than the organized efforts and formal programs, the question had encouraged people to see each other differently, to look beyond surface appearances and immediate judgments to find the love and hope and dreams that existed in even the most unlikely places. Marcus, now 12 years old and increasingly thoughtful about the world around him, had begun to ask the question himself. He volunteered at the shelter where they had once lived, helping younger children with homework and games. When new children arrived, scared and uncertain, he would sit with them and ask gently about who they missed, who they were worried about, who they were trying to help. Lily, at 8 years old, had developed her own version of the question. She couldn't always articulate it in words, but she had an uncanny ability to sense when someone was sad or lonely or in need of connection. She would offer hugs to crying classmates, share her lunch with children who had forgotten theirs, and invite shy newcomers to join her games at recess. The flower shop had become a place where this philosophy was lived out daily. Customers came not just to buy flowers, but to be heard and understood. The staff had learned to listen for the stories behind the purchases, to help people find exactly the right way to express their feelings through the language of flowers. They had customers who came in every week to buy flowers for elderly parents in nursing homes, teenagers who saved allowance money to surprise their mothers with small bouquets, spouses who wanted to apologize or celebrate or simply say, "I love you," without words. Each transaction was treated not just as a sale, but as an opportunity to participate in someone's moment of connection and caring. The success of the business had allowed them to expand their charitable giving, but they had done so thoughtfully, always with the goal of empowering others rather than creating dependency. They funded microloans for other young entrepreneurs, sponsored community gardens in low-income neighborhoods, and provided free flowers for funerals of families who couldn't afford them. Alexander had learned from Marcus and Lily that the most meaningful help came not from writing checks, but from building relationships. From taking the time to understand what people really needed, and then finding ways to provide it with dignity and respect. As they prepared for bed on that anniversary night, in the bedrooms that had become truly theirs over 2 years of laughter and tears and growing up together, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. He had started as a successful businessman with everything money could buy, but had been missing the things that money couldn't purchase: love and family, and the deep satisfaction that came from making a real difference in the world. Marcus and Lily had given him all of those things and more, had taught him that true wealth was measured not in assets but in relationships. The children had found not just a home, but a future full of possibilities they had never dared to dream. They had learned that they were worthy of love and care, that their voices mattered, that their dreams were valid and achievable. Together, they had created something that none of them could have achieved alone. A family bound not by blood but by choice, a business that served not just customers but community, a foundation that would continue to help children long after they were gone. The rain had stopped falling years ago, but the flowers that had brought them together continued to bloom, in the shop they ran together, in the lives they had touched, in the love they shared each day. And every morning when Alexander woke up in the house that had become a true home, when he heard the sounds of children getting ready for school and starting another day full of possibilities, he remembered the question that had changed everything and smiled at the beautiful answer that had grown from it. Who are you trying to help? The question echoed through their lives, reminding them daily that the greatest joy came not from what they could accumulate, but from what they could give, not from what they could achieve alone, but from what they could build together. And in that truth, they had found not just success, but happiness, not just survival, but the kind of abundant life that made every challenge worthwhile, and every day a gift to be treasured. 3 years had passed since that transformative anniversary, and the small flower shop called Lily's Garden had evolved into something extraordinary. What began as a single storefront had expanded into a network of 7 locations across the state, each one operated according to the same principles of community service and social responsibility that had guided the original. Marcus, now 15 and tall for his age, had developed into a remarkable young entrepreneur. His business acumen rivaled that of adults twice his age, but it was tempered by a compassion that had been forged in his early experiences of hardship. He spent his afternoons after school working at the main shop, where he had revolutionized their inventory system and developed new marketing strategies that emphasized their mission alongside their products. His latest project involved partnering with local high schools to create internship programs for students interested in business and horticulture. The program provided real work experience while also teaching participants about social entrepreneurship and community engagement. Marcus had presented the proposal to the school board himself, standing before a room full of adults and speaking with the confidence of someone who had learned early that his voice mattered. Lily, now 11, and radiating the kind of infectious joy that made everyone around her smile, had become the unofficial face of their expanding enterprise. Her natural charisma and genuine enthusiasm for their work made her a sought-after speaker at community events and fundraisers. She had a gift for explaining complex concepts in simple terms, helping audiences understand how business success and social impact could work hand in hand. But beyond her public role, Lily had developed a particular talent for floral design that surprised even Mrs. Rosario, who had been arranging flowers for 40 years. The girl seemed to understand instinctively how colors and textures worked together, creating arrangements that were both beautiful and emotionally resonant. Her designs had been featured in several home and garden magazines, though she always insisted that the articles mention the shop's charitable work alongside her artistic achievements. Alexander had watched both children grow into their roles with a mixture of pride and amazement. The scared, desperate boy he had met on that rainy night had become a confident young man with clear goals and the skills to achieve them. The sickly little girl who had coughed through sleepless nights was now a vibrant preteen whose laughter filled their home and whose creativity knew no bounds. The Chen Foundation had grown as well, now operating in 12 states and serving over 5,000 children annually. What had started as a modest effort to help a few foster children had become one of the most respected child welfare organizations in the country. The foundation's work had attracted national attention, leading to partnerships with major corporations and government agencies. But Alexander was most proud of the foundation's grassroots initiatives, the small programs that might not make headlines, but that changed individual lives in profound ways. There was the reading program that paired older children with younger ones, helping both groups develop literacy skills while building meaningful relationships. There was the music therapy initiative that used art to help traumatized children express emotions they couldn't put into words. There was the career mentorship program that connected foster teens with successful adults in various fields. Each program had been developed with input from Marcus and Lily, whose perspectives as former foster children provided invaluable insights into what actually helped versus what adults thought might help. Their involvement ensured that the foundation's work remained grounded in real experience rather than theoretical ideals. One particularly successful initiative had been the establishment of transition houses for young adults aging out of foster care. These facilities provided affordable housing, life skills training, and ongoing support for 18 to 25-year-olds who were navigating independence without family safety nets. The houses had dramatically reduced homelessness rates among former foster children, while also improving their educational and employment outcomes. Marcus had been instrumental in designing the life skills curriculum for these facilities, drawing on his own experiences of having to grow up too fast. He taught workshops on financial literacy, job interviewing skills, and practical matters like grocery shopping and apartment hunting. His sessions were always full, partly because of his expertise, but mostly because the residents trusted someone who had walked a similar path. The Flower Shop Network had become more than just a business. It had evolved into a social enterprise that demonstrated how commercial success could be achieved while maintaining a strong commitment to community service. Each location employed a mix of traditional workers and individuals from vulnerable populations, including former foster children, refugees, and people recovering from addiction or homelessness. The hiring philosophy had initially worried some business advisors, who cautioned that employing people with challenging backgrounds might create problems. But Alexander had learned from Marcus and Lily that people who had overcome significant obstacles often brought extraordinary dedication and creativity to their work. The shop's employee retention rates were actually higher than industry averages, and customer satisfaction scores consistently exceeded those of traditional floral businesses. Mrs. Rosario, now in her 70s, but still energetic and engaged, had become something of a legend in the community. Her mentorship had been crucial to the expansion of the business, but more importantly, she had provided stability and wisdom during the family's adjustment period. She often joked that she had gained not just business partners but grandchildren, and her apartment above the original shop had become a second home for Marcus and Lily. The relationship between Mrs. Rosario and the children had deepened over the years, with each learning from the others in ways that enriched all of their lives. She taught them about plant biology and business operations, but they taught her about resilience and the power of second chances. Together, they had created a working environment that felt more like an extended family than a traditional employer-employee relationship. The success of Lily's Garden had attracted attention from business schools and social entrepreneurship programs around the world. Alexander had been invited to speak at Harvard, Stanford, and other prestigious institutions about their model of combining profit with purpose. But he always brought Marcus and Lily with him to these engagements, recognizing that their perspectives as the beneficiaries of social investment were just as valuable as his insights as the investor. These speaking opportunities had led to consulting work with other organizations seeking to implement similar models. Alexander had been careful to accept only projects that aligned with their values, working with companies that wanted to create genuine social impact rather than just improve their public relations. The consulting fees were substantial, but all proceeds went directly to the foundation, further expanding their ability to help children in need. One consulting project had taken them to rural communities in the Midwest, where they helped establish a network of community gardens and farmers markets operated by foster families and recent immigrants. The project combined agricultural training with business development, creating sustainable income opportunities while also improving food security in underserved areas. Marcus had spent a summer working on one of these farms, learning about sustainable agriculture and developing an appreciation for the hard work involved in growing food. The experience had sparked his interest in environmental sustainability, leading him to research and implement eco-friendly practices across all of their business operations. The flower shops now used biodegradable packaging, sourced plants from organic growers, and operated composting programs that turned flower waste into fertilizer for community gardens. These changes had actually reduced operating costs, while also attracting environmentally conscious customers. Lily had developed her own passion for environmental issues, focusing particularly on the role that plants and flowers could play in improving urban air quality and mental health. She had started a research project in collaboration with the local university, studying how different types of floral arrangements affected mood and stress levels in hospital patients. The preliminary results were promising, suggesting that exposure to certain flowers could actually accelerate healing and reduce anxiety. Her research had led to partnerships with several medical facilities, where Lily's garden now provided specially designed therapeutic arrangements for patient rooms and waiting areas. The program had shown measurable improvements in patient satisfaction and recovery times, demonstrating once again how beauty and caring could have tangible positive effects on human well-being. The medical partnerships had also created opportunities for Marcus to explore his interest in healthcare administration. He had begun volunteering in hospital business offices, learning about the complex financial and operational challenges facing healthcare providers. His experiences in foster care had given him unique insights into the barriers that prevented vulnerable populations from accessing adequate medical care. Working with hospital administrators, Marcus had helped develop programs that provided free or reduced-cost floral therapy for patients who couldn't afford such services. The programs were funded through a combination of foundation grants, corporate sponsorships, and individual donations, creating sustainable models that could be replicated in other communities. The success of these healthcare initiatives had attracted the attention of medical researchers studying the connection between environment and healing. Alexander had been approached by several universities seeking funding for studies on how design elements, including plants and flowers, could be used to improve patient outcomes. The Chen Foundation had provided grants for several such studies, contributing to a growing body of research on the therapeutic value of natural beauty. But perhaps the most meaningful development in their expanding work had been the creation of the Young Leaders Program, an initiative that identified promising teenagers in foster care and provided them with intensive mentorship and leadership training. The program was deliberately small, working with only 20 students per year, but the results had been remarkable. Program participants received individualized support that included academic tutoring, career exploration, leadership development, and college preparation. But unlike traditional scholarship programs that focused solely on academic achievement, the Young Leaders Program recognized that foster children often needed help with basic life skills and emotional support, as well as educational assistance. Marcus and Lily had been intimately involved in designing the program, drawing on their own experiences to identify the types of support that would be most valuable. They served as peer mentors for program participants, providing guidance from the unique perspective of young people who had successfully navigated similar challenges. The first cohort of young leaders had graduated the previous year, with 18 of the 20 participants going on to college or technical training programs. More importantly, All 20 had developed the confidence and skills needed to build stable, independent lives. Several had already started their own small businesses or community service projects, continuing the cycle of giving back that had become central to the Chen family philosophy. One graduate, a young woman named Isabella who had aged out of foster care with no family support, had used her program training to start a catering business that employed other former foster youth. Another, a young man named David who had struggled with homelessness, had become a certified automotive technician and was saving money to open his own garage. Each success story reinforced Alexander's belief that young people could achieve extraordinary things when given appropriate support and encouragement. The Young Leaders program had also created unexpected benefits for Marcus and Lily, providing them with a peer group of young people who shared similar backgrounds and understood the unique challenges of growing up without traditional family support. These relationships had helped them process their own experiences while also developing leadership skills and empathy for others facing difficult circumstances. As Marcus prepared for his junior year of high school, he had begun thinking seriously about college and career plans. His experiences with the family business and foundation had given him insights into multiple fields, from entrepreneurship and finance to social work and public policy. He was considering a double major in business and social work, with the goal of eventually expanding the Chen Foundation's work nationally. But college planning for a former foster child, even one with significant resources and support, involved complexities that most teenagers never faced. Questions about family medical history for health forms, requests for parent signatures on various documents, and assumptions about family financial support all served as reminders of the ways that institutional systems weren't designed for non-traditional family structures. Alexander had worked closely with Marcus's guidance counselor to navigate these challenges, but the experience had highlighted broader issues affecting foster children's access to higher education. This recognition had led to another foundation initiative, a college access program that provided specialized support for foster youth, navigating the application and enrollment process. The program paired foster students with mentors who had experience with higher education systems, provided financial assistance for application fees and campus visits, and offered ongoing support throughout the college years. The program also worked with colleges and universities to train admissions and financial aid staff on the unique needs of foster students, improving institutional responsiveness to this vulnerable population. Lily's path toward high school was still a few years away, but she had already begun exploring her interests and talents in ways that suggested an equally bright future. Her artistic abilities had continued to develop, with her floral designs becoming increasingly sophisticated, and her interest in other visual arts expanding to include photography and digital design. She had started a blog documenting the flower shop's community outreach work, combining her artistic eye with storytelling skills that made complex social issues accessible to readers of all ages. The blog had gained a substantial following, with posts regularly shared across social media platforms and featured in local newspapers. Her writing had caught the attention of publishers interested in children's books about social issues, leading to discussions about a potential book project that would tell stories of resilience and hope through the experiences of young people like herself. The prospect excited Lily, who saw it as another way to help children in difficult situations by showing them that better futures were possible. The family's public profile had continued to grow, but Alexander had been careful to protect Marcus and Lily's privacy and normalize their lives as much as possible. They attended regular public schools, participated in typical teenage activities, and were encouraged to develop friendships and interests outside of their family business and foundation work. Both children had thrived in this balanced environment, developing into well-rounded individuals who were confident in their abilities but grounded in their values. They understood that their story was inspiring to others, but they also knew that they were more than just symbols of successful adoption or foster care reform. Marcus had joined his school's debate team and tennis club, finding outlets for his competitive nature that were separate from his business interests. He had also started dating, experiencing the normal joys and awkwardness of teenage romance, while navigating the additional complexity of having a very public family story. Lily had discovered a love for musical theater, participating in school productions and community theater groups. Her natural stage presence and emotional intelligence made her a compelling performer, and she had been encouraged to audition for more competitive programs. But she remained committed to her other interests as well, seeing performance as one of many ways to connect with and inspire others. The children's teachers and classmates had long since adjusted to their somewhat unusual family situation. But occasionally, there were reminders of how their story had touched people's lives. Marcus's economics teacher had restructured her curriculum to include more content on social entrepreneurship after learning about his family's work. Lily's art teacher had organized a class project creating arrangements for a local senior center, inspired by the flower shop's community service model. These ripple effects continued to amaze Alexander, demonstrating how authentically lived values could influence others in ways both large and small. The question he had asked on that rainy night 5 years ago continued to resonate, inspiring people to look for ways they could make a difference in their own communities. The Flower Shop Network had recently launched its most ambitious project yet, a partnership with urban planning departments in several cities to integrate therapeutic gardens into public spaces. The initiative combined Lily's research on the health benefits of flowers with Marcus's business development skills and Alexander's corporate connections. The pilot program had created healing gardens in hospital campuses, senior living facilities, and community centers, each designed specifically for its intended users. Gardens in pediatric hospitals featured bright, cheerful flowers and interactive elements that engaged young patients. Gardens in senior centers included raised beds that were accessible to people with mobility limitations and featured plants that would have been familiar to elderly residents during their youth. Early results from the pilot program had exceeded all expectations, with documented improvements in patient recovery times, reduced staff stress levels, and increased community engagement with CANA, participating facilities. The success had led to additional funding from both government sources and private foundations, enabling expansion to dozens of additional sites. The Urban Garden Project had also created new employment opportunities for program graduates and community members, providing training in landscape design, horticulture, and garden maintenance. These jobs paid well above minimum wage and included benefits, demonstrating once again how social impact initiatives could create economic value alongside their primary mission. As the family gathered for dinner on a warm evening in late spring, 5 years after that chance encounter in the rain, Alexander looked around the table at the remarkable young people Marcus and Lily had become. The conversation flowed easily between topics ranging from Marcus's latest business idea to Lily's upcoming theater audition to plans for the Foundation's annual fundraising gala. But what struck him most was not any specific achievement or milestone, but rather the natural ease with which they had grown into their roles as family members, business partners, and community leaders. The traumatized children who had once struggled just to survive had become confident young people who saw themselves as capable of changing the world for the better. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate. There had been difficult moments, setbacks, and challenges that tested all of their patience and resilience. Therapy had been crucial, particularly in the early years, helping Marcus and Lily process their experiences and develop healthy coping mechanisms. Alexander had also sought counseling to better understand how to support children who had experienced trauma and loss. But through it all, they had maintained their commitment to each other and to the values that had brought them together. The question, "Who are you trying to help?" had evolved from a moment of curiosity into a guiding principle that shaped their decisions both large and small. As they planned for the future, that principle continued to guide their thinking. Marcus was exploring colleges with strong social work programs, but also considering gap year opportunities that would allow him to gain more experience in international development work. The foundation had been approached about establishing programs in other countries, and Marcus was intrigued by the possibility of bringing their model to communities facing different but related challenges. Lily was thinking about high schools with strong arts programs, but also wanted to ensure she could continue her research and community work. She had been invited to present her findings on therapeutic flowers at a national conference on pediatric medicine, an opportunity that excited her both as recognition of her work and as a chance to influence medical professionals thinking about patient care. Alexander found himself looking ahead to new challenges and opportunities with the same sense of purpose that had guided him since that night when he chose to stop for a child selling flowers in the rain. The business empire he had built before meeting Marcus and Lily seemed almost trivial in comparison to the meaningful work they were doing together. But he also recognized that his earlier success had provided the resources and platform that made their current work possible. The lesson wasn't that business success was unimportant, but rather that success without purpose was ultimately empty. Marcus and Lily had given his achievements meaning by helping him understand how wealth could be used to create opportunity and hope for others. The flower shop that had started as a way to provide employment and purpose for 2 orphan children had evolved into something much larger and more significant. It had become a model for how business could be a force for social good, how profit and purpose could be pursued simultaneously, and how the most unlikely partnerships could produce extraordinary results. But at its heart, the story remained what it had always been, a testament to the power of human connection and the difference that one person could make in another's life. The question Alexander had asked in the rain continued to echo through everything they did, reminding them daily that the greatest achievements came not from what they could accomplish for themselves, but from how they could help others achieve their own dreams and potential. As they cleared the dinner dishes and prepared for another evening together in the home they had created, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, new chances to ask the question and listen carefully to the answers, new ways to extend the circle of caring that had transformed all of their lives. The rain had stopped falling years ago, but the flowers planted on that stormy night continued to bloom in ways none of them could have imagined, touching lives they would never meet and creating possibilities that extended far beyond anything they might have dreamed. And in that continuing growth and renewal, they found not just success, but meaning, not just achievement, a joy, not just a business, but a legacy that would endure long after they were gone.